Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever been corrected on your English in public? That sudden wave of heat in your face, the feeling that everyone is judging you? It's one of the hardest parts of learning a language, especially at work. Today's story follows Darius, a professional who faced his absolute worst nightmare during a high-stakes presentation. But this isn't just a story about making a mistake. It's a guide on how to handle public embarrassment with complete grace and professionalism. As we go through the story, pay close attention to the vocabulary and transition phrases we use. They'll help you navigate sticky workplace situations in English. Subscribe if you're ready to boost your listening and speaking confidence, and let's dive in. The conference room was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioner and the steady click of dress shoes on tile. Darius smoothed the front of his jacket, taking a slow, steady breath. This was the moment he had spent 3 weeks preparing for. Across the glass table sat the regional directors, their arms crossed, notebooks open, waiting for him to begin. "Good morning, everyone," Darius said, his voice firm and steady. "Thank you for making time today. Today I am excited to present our expansion strategy for the upcoming quarter." He clicked to the first slide. The graphic lit up the screen behind him, a clean, impressive chart showing projected growth across 3 new markets. Darius felt a swell of confidence. His opening remarks were flowing naturally. Every phrase rehearsed to perfection. He walked through the initial market analysis, pointing out demographic shifts and key revenue targets. Everything was on track. "As you can see from our research," Darius continued, turning toward the center of the table, "the data clearly shows that our target audience has reacted very positive to our early campaign trials. It was a small error, a missing suffix on an adverb, a minor slip that most native speakers make without thinking." But as the words left his mouth, Darius felt a tiny flicker of tension in his chest. Before he could naturally correct himself and keep moving, the room suddenly shifted.
Before Darius could smooth over the sentence, a voice cut sharply across the table. "Reacted very positively," corrected Richard, a senior strategist sitting near the front. He didn't say it warmly. His tone was brisk, precise, and loud enough to ring off the glass walls. "If you're modifying a verb, Darius, it's an adverb. Positively." The room went completely still. 2 directors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while another glanced down at her notepad. Darius felt the warmth rush instantly to his ears, a sharp prickle of heat creeping up his neck. His hands, holding the presentation clicker, suddenly felt stiff. "Right," Darius managed to say, forcing a small, neutral nod. "Reacted very positively." "Precision matters when we present to the board," Richard added, leaning back in his chair with a casual shrug, as if he had simply cleared a pebble from the road. The brief moment stretched into an agonizing silence. Darius looked back at the screen. The impressive charts and growth metrics were still glowing behind him, but the momentum was entirely gone. Every eye was fixed on him, waiting to see how he would respond to the sudden public check. His mind raced, scrambling to find the exact words to pull the presentation back on track without sounding defensive or shaken.
The silence in the room felt deafening. Though barely 5 seconds had passed, inside Darius's head, time had completely frozen. "Everyone is watching me," he thought, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "They think I don't know basic grammar. They think I'm unqualified." Richard's words echoed on a loop. "Precision matters." Darius tried to look back at his slide, but the numbers scrambled together into a meaningless blur. The confidence that had filled him just moments ago evaporated, replaced by a cold wave of self-doubt. He felt like an imposter standing in a suit that suddenly didn't fit. His throat felt dry, tight as a knot. He knew he needed to speak, to say literally anything to break the tension, but his brain refused to deliver the next line of his script. He had memorized every word, every transition, every key metric, yet all of it had vanished, wiped out by a single sharp correction. Across the table, one of the directors tapped a pen against her notebook. It was a tiny, subconscious gesture, but to Darius it sounded like a ticking clock. "Say something," he pleaded with himself. "Say something before you lose them completely." But the harder he tried to fight the embarrassment, the deeper into the spiral he sank.
Darius closed his eyes for a split second, grounding his heels into the floor. He knew that if he stayed frozen in Richard's trap, he would lose more than just the presentation. He would lose his authority. He took a slow, silent breath, feeling the panic peak and slowly begin to settle. "Thank you, Richard," Darius said, his voice coming out surprisingly grounded. He offered a brief, professional nod. Not apologetic, just composed. Precision is key. He didn't dwell on the moment or offer an awkward explanation. Instead, he took 2 measured steps toward the center of the screen, placing himself firmly back in the spotlight. Moving past the syntax, Darius continued, sweeping his gaze across the rest of the directors. The core takeaway remains unchanged. The consumer response proves that our timing is ideal. The shift in energy was immediate. By calmly acknowledging the correction without letting it derail his composure, the tension in the room began to evaporate. The director who had been tapping her pen stopped, nodding along as Darius broke down the next slide's projections. Richard leaned back, his attempt at dominance neutralized by Darius's unflappable grace. Darius hit the next slide button. His hands were steady now, his throat clear. He wasn't just delivering a sales strategy anymore. He was demonstrating executive presence under fire. As he guided the leadership team through the revenue estimates, his confidence returned, stronger this time, because it had been tested and held firm. He had taken back the floor, and the room was his once again.
And that concludes our quarterly expansion proposal, Darius said, bringing up his final overview slide. "Thank you for your time. I'm open to any questions." The boardroom broke into a chorus of soft nods and appreciative murmurings. Several directors chimed in with thoughtful questions about the budget, completely focused on the strategy rather than the earlier hiccup. Darius handled each inquiry with steady poise. When the meeting officially wrapped, chairs scraped against the polished floor as everyone gathered their notebooks and laptops. Yet, as people began filtering out toward the hallway, a heavy silence settled over the remaining space. Richard packed his leather briefcase in silence, not uttering a word or making eye contact as he slipped out the door. The initial warmth of Darius's triumph began to give way to a lingering sense of awkwardness. Did the directors truly care about his recovery, or would they only remember the mistake? As Darius unplugged his laptop cables, he carefully watched the subtle body language of the few people left in the room. A quiet side chat between 2 senior managers near the door felt suddenly suspicious. A hesitant smile from a junior analyst felt like pity. He zipped up his bag, standing alone in the quiet conference room. He had survived the presentation, but as he stepped into the hallway, he knew the real test was understanding where he now stood with his team.
Darius made his way toward the office break room, needing a quiet moment to let the residual adrenaline fade. He poured himself a cup of coffee, staring down at the dark liquid as it filled the ceramic mug. "You handled that surprisingly well," a calm voice said behind him. Darius turned to see Evelyn, the Senior Vice President of Operations. She was known across the firm for her sharp analytical mind and no-nonsense approach. Darius braced himself, unsure whether a second reprimand was coming. "Thank you, Evelyn," Darius replied carefully, keeping his tone measured. "I appreciate that." Evelyn leaned against the counter, holding her own mug. "Richard has a habit of doing that," she said, her expression softening into a faint, knowing smile. "He likes to test people. Early in my career, during my first major board deck, I mispronounced a key financial metric 3 times in 5 minutes. Richard made sure everyone noticed." Darius blinked, caught off guard. "Really?" "Really," Evelyn said. "What matters in these meetings isn't whether you speak flawless English every second. It's whether you can hold your composure when things go sideways. You didn't get defensive, you didn't apologize excessively, and you kept command of your data. That shows true executive presence." As Evelyn took a sip of her coffee and walked out, Darius felt a genuine weight lift from his chest. The shame was gone, replaced by a clear realization. His credibility hadn't been ruined at all. In fact, it might have actually grown.
By mid-afternoon, Darius decided he needed to close the loop. Avoiding Richard would only create an invisible elephant in the office. He walked over to Richard's glass-walled office, knocking lightly on the open door frame. "Got a quick minute, Richard?" Darius asked, keeping his posture open and relaxed. "Sure, Darius, come on in." Darius walked in and pulled out a chair. "I just wanted to follow up briefly after this morning's presentation. I appreciate you keeping an eye out for detail during the deck." He paused, letting the statement sit without defensive padding. Richard leaned back, tapping his pen against his desk, a habit Darius now recognized as a nervous tic rather than a display of power. "Look, Darius, I know I can be sharp in meetings," Richard said, his tone far less intimidating than it had been in the boardroom. "The leadership team can be ruthless with pitch details, and I like to ensure our group looks completely bulletproof before the final board review." Darius watched him closely, realizing in that moment that Richard's harsh interrupter persona wasn't actually a personal attack. It was driven by his own underlying anxiety about looking bad in front of executives. "I get it," Darius said smoothly. "Moving forward, if you notice any quick tweaks in my prep materials before we step into the room, feel free to ping me directly beforehand. I always welcome a second set of eyes." Richard blinked, then smiled slightly, nodding. "Deal. Good work on the rest of the pitch, by the way." The following morning, Darius sat down at his desk to compose the follow-up email to the regional directors. This was his chance to anchor the presentation's success in writing and lock in the momentum he had built. He opened a blank draft, carefully crafting each sentence. Instead of ignoring the presentation entirely or making a defensive reference to yesterday's interruption, he focused on actionable next steps and strategic clarity. Subject: Next Steps and Strategic Action Plan, Q3 Expansion. Dear Leadership Team, thank you for the constructive discussion during yesterday's expansion pitch. Per our conversation, I have updated the core proposal deck to incorporate your feedback on regional timelines and resource allocation. Attached, you will find the revised action plan along with the finalized data metrics. Please let me know if you would like to schedule a brief follow-up session to review the budget breakdown in detail before our final review with the board. Best regards, Darius. Within 20 minutes, a reply pinged in his inbox. It was from the lead regional director, CCing the entire senior team. Outstanding summary, Darius. The clarity and responsiveness are much appreciated. Let's move forward with Phase 1 immediately. Darius smiled as he read the email.
By handling the follow-up with absolute professionalism, he had converted a temporary slip into a masterclass in executive communication. Over the next few days, Darius noticed a profound shift in how he viewed his own English-speaking skills. For months, he had operated under the invisible pressure of believing that true fluency meant perfection, that every sentence had to be flawless, every grammar rule strictly obeyed, and every accent polished away. He realized now how exhausting and limiting that mindset had been. Focusing on avoiding errors had kept him in a defensive state, constantly monitoring his words instead of engaging in authentic communication. The room hadn't judged him for making a minor grammar mistake. They had evaluated him on how he carried himself under pressure. True confidence wasn't about never tripping. It was about knowing how to stand right back up without losing your stride. Darius began to reframe how he saw himself as a non-native professional. Being bilingual wasn't a handicap, it was a testament to adaptability, resilience, and effort. He stopped dreading public speaking and started viewing each meeting as an opportunity to connect and lead, rather than a test to pass. When you lose the fear of being wrong, he realized, you unlock the freedom to actually be heard.
3 weeks later, Darius stood at the front of the main executive boardroom. The atmosphere was charged, but this time he felt completely in control. He was presenting the final quarterly rollout plan to a room filled with senior executives, department heads, and regional managers, including Richard and Evelyn. Halfway through the presentation, a young analyst named Elena stepped up to report on her department's resource deployment. She was bright and capable, but English was her second language, and the pressure of the room was clearly getting to her. "Our team have completed the preliminary phase," Elena said, her voice faltering slightly as she realized her subject-verb agreement slipped mid-sentence. She flushed red and paused, her eyes widening in panic as she lost her train of thought. The silence stretched for a terrifying second. Darius saw the exact moment of fear taking hold of her, the same spiral he had experienced weeks before. Darius stepped forward smoothly, leaning into the microphone with a warm smile. "And that phase was completed ahead of schedule, which gives us a great head start," he said, seamlessly picking up the thread and setting the grammar right without making it a correction. "Elena, walk us through those impressive timeline results." Elena took a subtle breath, her posture unfreezing. Grateful for the bridge Darius had built, she launched into her data with renewed confidence. As the presentation ended to unanimous approval, Evelyn caught Darius's eye from across the room and gave him a quiet, appreciative nod. Darius smiled back. He was no longer just recovering his own dignity, he was setting the standard for leadership. Darius's story reminds us that making a mistake in front of others isn't a failure. It's just a test of how you handle the spotlight. True confidence isn't about speaking flawless English. It's about having the resilience to keep going, own your space, and eventually lift others up when they stumble too. If you've ever felt that sudden wave of panic during a meeting or a conversation, remember that your message and your presence matter far more than a single misplaced suffix. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more real-world English stories, and drop a comment below. You can find the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been publicly corrected, and how did you bounce back? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.